Welcome to Echoes in the Gallery. I am your host, Susan L. Sistrunk. As a lifelong educator and artist, it is my privilege to bring you my first original podcast set in a series of volumes. Each episode will air weekly on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tonight, during episode 21, Up in the Air, we will discover how the group plans to keep the status quo while searching for Tuturia and Sergei. How will Gwen and Jonathan interact now that they are face to face? And what will Rachel say to Ivanov in order to save her own skin? Let us step into the gallery and begin. Episode 21, Up in the Air. Where in the hell is Lahitis? Ivanov asked calmly. Looks to be really close to Mexico, right on the Rio Grande. Jordan was nervously rubbing his hands together. This man could, and probably would, have him killed. Kid, do you know how big the Rio Grande is? Show me on the map. This computer genius was useful, but he was infuriating Ivanov at the same time. He really didn't have the patience for this right now. Jordan sensed he was starting to walk on thin ice with Ivanov. He turned the computer around and showed him. Ah, looks like they want to cross the border undetected, or they would have just flown to Mexico. We need to get to them before that happens. I want my money back. Now. He turned to Jonathan and Rachel. Where did you put my diamonds? Maybe Gwen can get you to talk. She apparently worked wonders on my man Yuri. I have actually never seen someone waterboarded. Not with paint thinner, anyway. It must have been quite the sight. Jonathan's jaw dropped open, and he stared at Gwen in disbelief. You did what? You have put everyone in a precarious situation, Jonathan. And you underestimate me if you think for one moment I am willing to die for you and this insane woman. Gwen stood up and said, It's time to change your bandage. I believe Mr. Ivanov asked you not to talk to me during the process. I can do this easily or as painfully as possible. Gwen got some supplies from the back of the plane while Eric moved Jonathan away from Rachel and the others so Gwen could work without distractions. They could hear Ivanov speaking to Rachel during the process. So what was your plan? You really don't care about Jonathan, do you? Were you going to steal the diamonds and sell the painting and leave him for dead? Rachel was quiet at first. She needed to think quickly. In order to get out of this alive, Ivanov needed to believe only she could take him to the diamonds. So she started with the truth. I didn't know about the diamonds, and I didn't know you were the buyer of the painting. I had a plan to switch your painting out with the forgery. It's true. We were going to figure out what to do about the diamond situation once I sold the painting. We found them when taking the painting out of the frame. And where are they now? Ivanov eyed her closely. So far, she seemed to be telling the truth. The diamonds were important to him. They belonged to someone else, and it was crucial he delivered them on time. That was why he had stashed them in the painting at the gallery in the first place. They're safe. If anything happens to Jonathan or I, you will never see them again. This was actually true on Jonathan's part. In the back of the plane, Gwen was tending to Jonathan under the protection of Eric. She peeled off his bandage. The wound looked terrible. The stitch job was clumsy at best and looked hurried. Understandably so. He and Rachel must have been under extreme duress. But it was weird. The wound appeared to have been stitched twice, and it was bulging as if a severe infection was lodged under the skin. Her breath caught, and she looked in Jonathan's wide eyes. He shook his head slightly. His eyes pleaded with her. Damn them both, Gwen thought. She brought Eric's attention to the wound and put a finger to her lips. He nodded slightly. Best to keep this information secret for now. It would sway the balance of their necessity to Ivanov. What is going on back there? Ivanov asked. Gwen kept an even voice and called out, His wound is infected. I'm going to need some alcohol to clean it. Get some vodka out of the liquor cabinet. That should work. Ivanov smiled at the thought. Jonathan made a motion to rise, and Eric shoved him back in the seat. Not on your life, buddy. She has earned this, and I hope she enjoys every second. Gwen came back with the vodka and a smile. Now, normally she didn't consider herself a vengeful person, but Jonathan had lied, cheated, and put her life at risk, so she figured there was no harm in soaking in this little bit of fun. As the vodka poured over his homemade stitches and bulging wounds, Jonathan cried out. Eric held him down while Gwen poured and piled gauze on top of the bulge protruding from his neck. This will hurt as I push in, but you'll just have to deal with it for now. Jonathan looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. How was he going to get out of this alive? Maybe he could escape on the ground and get to a doctor in Mexico. When do I get the diamonds back, Rachel? There is more than just me to consider here. As bad as you may think I am, it is nothing compared to what the actual owner of the stones will do to you if I hand you over to them. Rachel had been thinking the entire time about how to get out of this situation. She must keep the status quo with Ivanov until they landed. And Jonathan needed to keep his mouth shut. This was no time for him to become penitent over the fact he had screwed Gwen over and spill his guts to Ivanov. She looked Ivanov in the eye. You will get your diamonds back when we are safely back in San Francisco. Not a moment before. You will release us in a public spot, and I will write down where I left the diamonds. You will not follow us, or I will make sure you never see the diamonds again. There are more people involved on this end as well. This was a bluff, but Rachel needed Ivanov to believe her and keep the situation stable. The attitude Gwen had adopted made her nervous. This new steely resolve was something Rachel had never seen in her. We will see. I suppose if the diamonds are still in San Francisco, there is nothing to do now anyway, and it won't matter if I torture Jonathan for the information. You don't love him anyway. Jonathan's eyes grew wide as he listened to this last statement. Oh, you didn't know? She planned on killing you all along after she sold the painting to her unknown buyer. Ivanov lifted his fingers in quotation marks. I know what you're going to say. How do I know this? Well, when we searched her, we found something interesting. Ivanov pulled out a syringe. Let's test it out, shall we? Ivanov quickly uncapped the needle and plunged it into Rachel's hand, releasing the contents. This concludes episode 21 of Echoes in the Gallery. Join me, your host, Susan L. Sistrunk, next week for episode 22, Lahitas. Will Sergei and Tuturia be located? How will Rachel and Jonathan find their way out of the mess they are in? And where are the diamonds? As always, thank you for listening. Stay safe and love each other.